So here is famous Karnak, Mont Saint Michel, and this is the account we went to investigate and look for the bones. Basically, in 1890, 4 different bones, femoral midshaft and other parts were found, and the anthropologist Laplanche studied them. And there was a peer review at the time of this case. And here are the bones right here. And this story was brought to us by the researcher Micah Ewer, who's a friend of mine and has done a lot of work in this area and uncovering these buried reports. Right here is another shot of it, and this is what these bones look like when compared and rearticulated into proper size. You have basically the remains of an 11-foot giant, and that's what the conclusion was of these scientists at the time. And they indicated it wasn't morbid growth, it wasn't pituitary gigantism. So Laplanche, well-regarded anthropologist, respected by Madison Grant, and even included in Topinard's journals. So his atheistic, Darwinian, socialist, anti-Semitic, eugenist views make his discovery of giant bones all the more noteworthy. This is what Micah Ewers was saying about this find. His calculations indicate the Neolithic giant man was about 3.5 meters tall and several hundred kilograms weight, 11 feet 6 and 1,000 pounds. So we went and we searched for these bones at the University of Montpellier, but Laplanche was fired because he was such an anti-Semitic and a racist. So we were looking and trying to find if they were in a private collection or not, because we wanted to get them examined and DNA tested, but so far we haven't found what happened to them. So that story doesn't stand alone. Right here you have skulls measuring 28, 31, and 32 inches of circumference, which is absolutely enormous. And they were supposed to have been brought to the Paris Academy. Once again, these ancient reports or these ancient remains are brought to different institutions, and then they can't seem to be located. We have many of these accounts from France. Bones of giants are unearthed near Paris. This is after the war that German prisoners found many of these giant remains. This skeleton, one of which measured 8 feet 7 inches, lay in a sarcophagus formed of flat stones in Gap, France. This one is particularly interesting. In each case, the heads were of great size with huge jawbones. In the U.S., you have many of these accounts where the jawbone fits over the face. Right here, 13-foot long skeleton uncovered. And basically, Cecilia Hall, our friend, put together this map of the U.S. showing all these accounts. Once again, I'm not going to claim every one is true, but there's another story going on here. Is it, can it be that all these were conjured up as hoaxes or mismeasurements? It really seems unlikely. And Hugh and I right now are writing a book on the giants of the British Isles, and all these accounts are starting to come forward as well. And this is a phenomena that you find in isolated Pacific islands. It's basically all ubiquitous all around the world. So at the site of Nan Madol in Pohnpei, you have the megalithic ruins that exist there. And the native people there tell the story that there were 2 twin brothers who were sorcerers who showed up from a lost, sunken continent, and they levitated these stones to build this ancient site. Now, it's dated to around 12 or 1300 years ago by the Sodalere Empire by modern-day archaeologists, but the natives tell a different story. And in fact, my friend who was on my show, Al Parapan, he lived in Pohnpei, and he taught English there, and he was friends with many of the natives. In fact, one day he took fruit from the site when he visited, he brought it back, and they told him to throw it away because it was cursed. The native people literally call this place the place of ghosts, the place of giants. They view it in a malevolent way. They don't take credit for their ancestors having built it. There's basically the superstitious dread associated with the site. And that's not like conjured up so somebody could, write a passage in a book or something like that. That's literally what the native people say there. So you also have this account from the American Geographical Society. In 1838, Captain Coffin of the ship Ohio Nantucket and Captain Sherman of the Marcus Fairhaven visited the vaults together in Nan Madol and took from it human bones of gigantic size. Now, that's the American Geographical Society. It's not the National Enquirer. You know, there are many reputable publications that are reporting these giant finds. Here's the site right here. It's a massive megalithic complex. I think over 250 million tons of basalt was quarried and brought from the other side of the island to build this place. It's really, you know, quite an amazing construction. And here's this story we covered in our show as well. In the early 20th century, when the island was under German rule, Governor Victor Berg entered the sealed tomb of Nan-Madol and opened the coffin of the ancient island rulers. He found skeletons of giants 8 to 9 feet tall. The next morning, on April 30th, 1907, on a stormy night, Governor Berg died. The German physician serving on the island could not determine the cause of death. The natives, certain it was a curse that proved supernatural powers, guard the city of the dead. So you find this like sowers of thunder idea all around the planet where you disturb the ancient graves of the giants. You end up conjuring some kind of geomantic or you know, supernatural dread and storms and things like that. So Hugh and I must think that's funny. Here we are at our office. And I have, like the Zodiac Killer, all these accounts pasted all over the wall. Now, this is another part of the world where giants were reported in Patagonia. And, you know, we have these reports for hundreds of years from Magellan and Sir Francis Drake, and there were reports of 9 and 10 foot tall giant people. You know, I think the reality might be a little in the middle, if you will. Maybe not 9 to 10 foot tall, but certainly, you know, a race of people that seem much taller than your average day people, an anthropological curveball, if you will. So we have Frederick Cook, who wrote about the Ona tribe from 6 to 7.5 feet tall, and they wore animal skins, had horse endurance and bull strength. He photographed a 6'6" Ona woman, a 7-foot male, and others. So in researching the British Isles for these accounts of giants, we found an association at basically every megalithic site you can mention. There's a giant account or a giant legend. And here we have Merlin being assisted by a giant in the creation of Stonehenge, called the Giant's Dance originally. And we have this 9'4" skeleton that was found near Salisbury in the area of Stonehenge. And this account is particularly telling because a lot of the criticism is like, oh, these accounts are hundreds of years old. They're farmers and you know, folklorists and people who don't understand science. But this account was made in 1950. Irishmen were giant, ancient supermen dug up in burial chambers. Now this is at Four Knocks in Ireland, this site. Irish archaeologists have unearthed traces of a bygone race of supermen in a prehistoric burial chamber dated to 2000 BC. They found human skeletons which tower head and shoulders over modern man. Most are around 7 feet in height, of extraordinary width of shoulder and massive bone construction. And the yellow pages of Irish folklore and mythology, 7-foot giants strode gloriously through a land of milk and honey. So here's the site right now, Four Knocks, and this is what it looks like. And this is hardly the only site that we find giants' remains reported. Right here, I found the skeleton of a man measuring 8 feet. 8 foot 5.5, unearthed with an old sword bearing the following inscription: Donogh O'Keefe, 1231 AD. 10 foot tall giant reported here. The 3 persons had been interred in separate graves, all encased in stones. The skull of the giant measured 18 inches from the crown to the head, of the head to the chin. Once again, the measurement of a stationary object is occurring here. So it's like 18 inches, head to crown, head to chin. Femur bone was 29 inches, circumference was 32 inches, things like that. This is an interesting account. This giant has 6 toes. It was published in an article, I think in 1897 in the Strand magazine. Now, people scoff at this because the Cardiff giant in the United States was found, and it was known to be a hoax that was created. And the whole idea was derided of it being real. But this was laid up against a rail car here for this picture, and they basically showed this giant all around, the UK and Ireland in the late 1890s, and then it disappeared. And it has 6 toes, which is interesting, and I can't really proclaim to know what the story is all about. I just wanted to show it. And here is the entire story of it right now, 12 feet 2 inches. So all around the British Isles, you have dolmens that are considered giants' graves. They're really beautiful works of construction. They're always associated with giants and dropping stones from their aprons, or ancient pathways. And being a stonemason, I'm just a fan of the beauty of all these constructions and how challenging it is to build these things. And speaking of a challenging site, here's Baalbek in Lebanon, and these 3 stones weigh from 800 to 1,000 tons, I believe. For me, this is a real megalithic marvel. The weight, I think, is around 2 million pounds for these stones that were laid up at Baalbek. And there's some speculation that, it's more ancient than Roman times. And, the local people tell a different story. And here's an account from 1432. Baalbek is a good town, well enclosed with walls and tolerably commercial. In the center is a castle built with very large stones. At present it contains a mosque, in which it is said there is a human skull with eyes so enormous that a man may pass his head through their openings. Here's Hugh at the quarry. Shows you how outrageous and immovable these stones are. So Graham Hancock says the following: I believe these huge megaliths long predate the construction of the Temple of Jupiter and are likely to be 12,000 more years old, contemporaneous with the megalithic site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. I suggest we are looking at the handiwork of the survivors of a lost civilization, that the Romans built their Temple of Jupiter on a pre-existing megalithic foundation, and that they were unaware of the giant hewn megaliths in the ancient quarry, as these were covered by sediment in Roman times. Now here's the Roman construction at the site. According to the Maronite Patriarch of Lebanon, tradition states that the fortress of Baalbek is the most ancient building in the world. Cain, the son of Adam, built it in the year 133 of the creation during a fit of raving madness. He gave it the name of his son Enoch, and peopled it with giants who were punished for their inequities by the flood. So here in Egypt, once again, we have legends of giants. This is put together by researcher Mohammed Abdo. You see these giants portrayed all through Egypt. And in fact, we have an account in 1881 of Professor Timmerman finding giants in the Temple of Isis. Here is Zawi Hawass looking at what is categorized as a giant with elongated skull. I'd love to know what he's thinking. And the site of the Assyrian and other sites in Egypt are thought to maybe be more ancient than once believed. I could tell you that the megalithic construction here of granite is exceedingly impressive. And you find these myths and legends that surround these sites as well. So we are told in the year 820 AD, way back in the days of the glory of Baghdad, the great Sultan, the fall of the descendants of the great Al-Rashid of Arabian Nights, the Sultan Al-Rashid Al-Ma'an, decided to open the Great Pyramid. He had been told that it had been built by giants who were called the Shaddai, superhuman beings, and that within the pyramid, in those pyramids, they had stored a great treasure beyond the knowledge of man. This is by Manly P. Hall, the great Freemason author and wisdom keeper, and he relates this account of giants and the supernatural. That's one of the things here. In all these stories you get supernatural aspects involved that, in modern day you're like, that's mythological, it doesn't make any sense. But that's what these people talk about. These ancient people tell stories of the supernatural over and over again. In Sardinia, there are amazing megalithic structures, accounts of giants, legends of giants. If you're a fan of Ancient Aliens, they just did an Ancient Sardinian giant episode that Hugh Newman was in, and they used some of our research in the show and a lot of Hugh's footage It's because it's a really compelling story. We have giants' tombs all around the island, and we have giant skeleton accounts. Like in 1953, Reuters reported that excavations at a nearby Puerto Torres have uncovered the skeletons of two giant warriors who died 4,000 years ago. The two skeletons, both intact and surrounded by weapons, furnishings, and vases, were more than 8 feet tall. That's in 1953 by Reuters. Here are some of the tombs and the megalithic sites around the island. Just really, really fine stonework. It was considered the last stronghold of the giants, Sardinia.